Have a Misora from the Vilna Gaon that when Russia enters Crimea, and that's the bells of Moshiach. The bells are the sound that you hear before something's about to start. The bells ring. When the Russians enter Istanbul, the Vilna Gaon says, put on your Yantif clothing. And in fact, Rav Eli Ber Wachtvogel, to Rosh in South Fallsburg in America, he's already put on his Yantif clothing. He said that his father, Rav Nelson Wachtvogel, used to carry a suitcase around with his Yantif clothing, getting ready for Mashiach, and he's put them on already. Chavetz Chaim also. And we have to understand, if the Vilna Gaon made such a statement, there must be very, very great depth in that statement. And it's not something that we could take lightly. We have to understand who the Gra was. When Avram ben Avram, the famous Ger Avram ben Avram, was put into jail, the Gra said, if you want, I can get you out. There's no problem. There's different ways in Kabbalah that we can accomplish this. And Avram ben Avram said, no, I don't want to be getting out. I want to die. I'll Kiddush Hashem. Hashem put me in this situation. I want to die in Kiddush Hashem. In another instance, once the Vilna Gaon was meeting with a certain non-Jewish leader, he said, if you wanted, I could take all the stars of the universe and put them on the table. The Gra had the entire gamut of knowledge in front of him, everything. He knew everything. The only thing he didn't learn, in fact, was practical medicine, because then 24/7 he would have been obligated to deal with medical shilas. But he understood everything in the world, and he wrote that that the sign before Mashiach comes, the sign that Mashiach is on the way, is very close, is going to be Russia entering Crimea, and then um, Russia entering Istanbul. And again, the Gra doesn't need my backing, but the Gra wrote a parish on Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is the book that Avram Avinu authored, how Hashem created the world. The Gra knew every single aspect of what was going on, and this is the assertion that he made. We have to understand it. What does that really mean? That when the Russians go into Crimea, it's the bells of Mashiach, and when they enter Istanbul, put on your Yontif clothing. In fact, my wife told me last night, she was on CNN News, that there's a dispute going on right now between Russia and Turkey about warships going into the Black Sea. And the president of Turkey is prime minister of Turkey is yes going to let the Russians in, not get the Russians in. We're dealing with very, very significant times when we see the words of the Goner potentially coming to fruition. But something we have to remember about all of these simanim is that simanim are very nice, but they have to be accompanied with their actions as well. If we don't do something about if we don't change ourselves, then Mashiach will not come unless we reach a point of kulo chayiv, which we hope we won't get there. So I once asked Rav Sternbach the depth, what's the inner meaning of what the Gra was saying. What's the deeper meaning of what the Gra was saying? He explained to me as follows. There's a star in Shemaim called Dubiel. The Marshal mentions in a few places in Shas, in Sanhedrin Daf Sadiches, and in Kedushin Daf Ayin Beis. The Marshal says that this Dubiel is the Sar of Pras. Right? Every nation has a Sar. Right? If you ever wondered why certain countries people act like this and they dress like this and they have these characteristics, that all comes from the Sar Lamala. The characteristics of the Sar regulate the characteristics of the nation. So Dubiel is the Sar of Pras. We know that Sancheiriv came and mixed up all the nations of the world. Pras is Persia, Pras is Persia, but Sancheiriv came and mixed up all the nations of the world. So today, the Vilna Gaon said, today Dubiel is in Russia. Dubiel is the Tsar of Russia, which means that basically Russia is Pras. And the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Ayin Beis is what describes the midas of the people of Pras. It says they're like bears, right? And for that reason, Dubiel Dov is a bear. The Gemara in Kedushin Daf Ayin Beis says that the Parsoim are hairy like bears, and they're heavy like bears. And they have other attributes like bears. And this is what the nation is all about. The Maharsha in Yuma Daf Ayin Zayin says, he says Nikra Dubiel, they're called Dubiel, like the Gemara says. They're Subalim Kadov, they're heavy like bears, and they're hairy like bears. And in fact, every nation has their characteristics. It's not so far. The people who know Russians to say that they're heavy and hairy. That's not so far off. So said the Gra, when the Tsar of Dubiel reaches a certain peak, when it reaches a peak, then in Shemayim that gives the nation that's under that Tsar strength. And the Gra explained that the simon, the sign of reaching that level of strength, is when the Russians go into Crimea and when they go into Istanbul. It represents the fact that they reached their highest peak and that the time for Mashiach is in place. Yeah, it doesn't mean that it'll come. That's contingent on our actions, but the time for Mashiach is in place, and that's what we're seeing in front of our eyes today. Right? Rav Sternbach added that the reason that that's the sign is because Dubiel represents a certain level of tuma. When the world has reached that level of tuma, it says do or die. It's either Mashiach comes or I don't know what the other side is, but we see this happening today. We see um, that Russia is on the move. This means that the Tsar of Dubiel has been strengthened, and it's a call to action. Just gonna add one more point, and we'll conclude with that. That the Medrash says, the Medrash at the end of Bereshis, Medrash Rabbah Memtes, that how do you fight the Tsar of Dubiel? What's the key? What's the key to fighting the Tsar of Dubiel? So it says that when Yaakov Avinu gave a bracha to the Shvatim, he gave a bracha to Binyamin that they're Zev Torev. Now Rashi and Daniel, it's on Pasuk Perek Zayin Pasuk Hey. Rashi and Daniel says that the Targum of Zev is Dov, right? The Targum of Zev is Dov, and that the Koyach to fight the Dov, right, was given over as a bracha to Binyamin, right? And Binyamin is called Zev Yitraf. That means Binyamin, Shevet Binyamin, has the koyach to fight the Tsar of Dubiel. What's the midah of Shevet Binyamin, right? The midah of Shevet Binyamin. So the Medrash says that the midah of Shevet Binyamin we learned from Mordechai, and the Vilna Gaon in Megillah Esther says that Mordechai's midah was tefillah. Right? The Megillah tells us that Mordechai was Yair ben Shimi ben Kish. Megillah says, and the Chazal tell us Yair, he was Meir Einayim Shel Yisrael Tefillah. Shimi, that Hashem, he made Hashem hear Tefillah's Kish. He pounded on the doors of heaven. That Mordechai's midah was Tefillah, and that the way that Mordechai's midah was Tefillah, this implies that the way to overcome Dubiel is through Tefillah. In fact, Chazal tell us that before Mashiach comes, the primary weapon that we'll have in our hands is tefillah. Right? Yishmael comes from Yishmakel. Hashem will hear our tefillahs. And as we see the Russians strengthening and moving into Crimea and perhaps into Turkey, the avoda right now is tefillah. We have to strengthen ourselves in tefillah. This is the avoda of Purim. This is the avoda of Adar. And this is the avoda as we see Dubiel getting stronger. Hashem should give us siyat shmaying during this period to recognize this and strengthen ourselves in tefillah as Mordechai did in the time of Purim. Amen.